As to the question of whether there is any self-correcting system within philosophy, no, there absolutely is not. Uh, there is something else, though. There is the other side to the dialectic. Um, but it really is very difficult to grasp because we, by nature, in terms of our sense of dignity and hope and aspirations, focus only on one side. We focus on, for instance, mastery, intelligibility, dominance, predictability, um, the deployment, rather than simply actually just employment of language in order to obtain a feeling of mastery, strength, and power. And we focus on these sides of things necessarily because we aspire to climb higher. We aspire to do better, to stand tall, to reach high, to be high. And these are all very, very human tendencies. The human tendency is to do that. In the end, what a limit experience is really nothing other than facing death. Death is the demise of all of these wonderful towers of hope, aspiration, expectation, and above all, the fundamental problem that pertained to mid and earlier 20th century modernity, the overshooting of optimism, the branching beyond what's actually good for us. Not even really a branching, but kind of like a rocketing up beyond what's healthy for us, in the sense that if we have these really wonderful aspirations, these really wonderful certainties about civilization and its supreme value, and rationality and its supreme value, then we end up overcommitting ourselves to these notions and to the circumstances that would harness these notions for no good. World War I, World War II, and other very harmful events that also have taken place. So total commitment, total drive forward, no skepticism, no underestimation of the value of the heights. That's actually a very bad thing. That actually is an imbalance. But the correction to that is not as plain as it would seem. You can't just sort of die, and death, a biological death, isn't a correction to that. Maybe some would argue that it could be, or it should be, or it would be. But I think that that's part of the passive demeanor that defines contemporary modernity, that we just expect some force to act in some way on our behalves, and we don't want to act on our behalves. Very, very passive. Passivity is the defining force of the most contemporary modernity. And prior to that, there was the other issue of people's overcommitment to the ideal, which led to mass death on the battleground and so on. Now we're very, very passive. Now we say, well, we can't act, we might do the wrong thing, or we can't act because actually we don't have the internal discipline to know how to act. And that's a big problem. It can't be effective because we don't know how. We don't have the experience of knowing how. We don't have the experience of reacting in an appropriate and timely way and taking control. And also the other problem is the ideology of individualism and its extreme and unwarranted antipathy toward anything that names itself collectivism. Cheers. It's actually It's Gulan. Gulan tea. Wrong way around that way. It's supposed to be very good for you, and I'm finding it is actually very good for hormonal balancing. If I take that like maybe once or hang on, wait, twice a week. Yeah, okay. Uh, these issues are relating to different periods of historical time. Now, their correction for an overcommitment to the ideal, an overcommitment and overcertainty in the belief in the heights, which is what Bataille implemented as well as in terms of his critique of Nietzsche. It was a critique also made of Nietzsche's aspiration to the heights while he fell down. Bataille says, and maybe he kind of anticipated he would. Maybe he had a melancholy or tragic disposition that he would like to fall down. But the real theoretical underpinning behind that is that everything that goes high falls. So what goes up must come down. And just the fact that Nietzsche kept going up and up and up and up, there is an equal and opposite reaction in terms of dialectics. So it's bound to lead downward in the end. You can't just go upward. It's pursuing the ideal forever. There are other forces that will start to pull you down, like the force of the physical body, like the force of death working itself through you. We have biological death working itself through us, and the force of tragedy. So that's the other side, and that's the side that Bataille tries to bring out for us in the unfinished system of non-knowledge. It's the side that we overlook in our human aspirations, the side that we neglect, the side that we devalue, want to disregard and discard. That's the components of death, the components of deterioration, the components of tragedy, the components of the organic body, all these things that we want to dismiss as unimportant or irrelevant, but those are the other aspects of life that do in fact have their influence and will have their influence and must have their influence. And in that way there is somehow at work a kind of self-correction. But don't overestimate it. It's not going to really be your friend unless you acknowledge and embrace it and work with it. Otherwise, it could be your very, very worst enemy and take you by surprise. This other side to things, this darkness side to things, this stuff we call negative, anything that we hold as degrading or bad or harmful. This side of things we need to come to terms with, we need to face, we need to embrace. And actually the weird thing is when we do, we become stronger and more whole and just all around better people, more able to recognize the nuances in things, more able to recognize the fragility in certain things, life forms, and to be more forgiving in some respects, although maybe less forgiving in other respects because we don't hold out so much hope anymore for things that are bound to die anyway, things that are bound to deteriorate anyway. That knowledge makes us able to let go of things much better too. So some random, not so random, some sort of somewhat gathered and collected thoughts. I was battling the music as well.